What's up, everybody? I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, and my local news channel runs this bit from time to time. It's called like Everyday Heroes or something like that. And they go and feature somebody who's doing something redemptive in society, a local good guy. And what they're trying to do is be self-aware and say, we talk about all this other stuff, but this is what really matters. Well, unfortunately, the reality of what they believe and what the audience believes is betrayed by where the emphasis goes over the course of the rest of the newscast, which is toward the politicians and the musicians and the celebrities and the athletes and even the newscasters. The medium is the message, and there the medium is emphasizing heavily that, come on, we all know these are the people who are really the movers and shakers who make society what it is and make things happen. And Carl, who donates bread to people who are down on their luck, that's nice, and we need to acknowledge it from time to time. The same mentality would have been in place for the original audience that Matthew is writing to, that Jesus was talking to in the first century. There was a strata in the mind of normal folks, that they're important people, and that's a tiny minority of everybody in society. And then there's all the spectators, the normies, the people who need to be there to provide goods and services and get things done. But they're not the people who really make things happen. They're not the great people. And the normal people are expected to think about the great people and grapple and debate with what the great people did or should do next. And that's the cultural trade-off. But the Gospel of Matthew describes a Jesus who seems to reject that strata, that caste system, if you will. Jesus seems to really have a soft spot for people who are not impressive, and he seems to be very willing to criticize the impressive people he encounters. And I think this theme is on display grandly in Matthew 19, verses 13 through 15, something we started looking at yesterday, when Jesus has this encounter with some children. It says, "Then little children were brought to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked those who brought them. Jesus said, 'Let the little children come to me and don't hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven,'" again, "for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Look, one of the really obvious riddles of the book of Matthew, or it's not really a riddle, it's just a big question that everybody should be asking as they read through it, is how does one get into this kingdom? Jesus keeps describing it. It keeps sounding awesome, like everything you would want. How does one sign up? How do you do that? How do you gain entry? Well, the Pharisees and Sadducees, the religious leaders of the day, they had one route that they were proposing and doubling down on and very committed to. And that was be very, very, very good, make donations to our stuff, and trust our leadership. And in doing so, as we've discussed in earlier conversations, they had a notion of, to some degree, individual salvation, but also some sort of national salvation. And they felt they needed to get people's behavior up to snuff nationally, and then somehow God would return his blessing, throw off the oppressor. They all had slightly different versions of how things would work out for the good if corporately they behaved better. But then along comes Jesus, and it seems like his equation is entirely different. It looks like Jesus' equation massively minimizes what your behavior has to do with becoming an heir, an agent of this great kingdom. Jesus gives other very specific clues about who's in the kingdom of heaven, but he doesn't really neatly spell it out. He gives indicators, little bits that we can latch onto to create a composite Jesus answer to the question of who's in the kingdom, or how is one in the kingdom. And it starts all the way back in his first big public speech in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Same language that we just looked at in Matthew 9 with the children thing. "Let the little children come to me and don't hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Okay, well, it looks like, as we discussed way back in the day, early in this podcast when we were in Matthew chapter 5, it looks like that poverty of spirit, that lowness, that position of need is one of the markers of someone who is in the kingdom. It's one of the markers of what it takes or what it is to be kingdom ready. And then you fast forward through a few more of those Beatitudes. Blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers. And you get to, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. And he says it again, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, it's the same thing that he said in Matthew 19, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Okay, so someone committed deeply to these values to the point that they even suffer because their commitment to the values of the kingdom make them weird compared to world values. That's a marker of being kingdom ready or in the kingdom. Interesting. We move ahead just a little bit further. In Matthew 5:20, Jesus then says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees or the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." Okay, so now he's really highlighting my plan for how you get things right with God, or how things get right with God, rather, is very different from the Pharisees' plan. Their plan is behave really, really well. I mean, you can never behave as well as us, but behave very, very well, and maybe we'll talk to some people and for some small clerical fees, move some things around, and we can see about getting you right with God. Jesus' plan is much different. He's saying, if you want to go that route, you'd have to do even better than them, effectively abolishing their plan for how to be in the kingdom of heaven, if you will, and establishing that there's only one plan that could work. And at this point in Matthew chapter 5, that plan is not yet fully spelled out. But the attentive audience members should be like, okay, well, if it's not the status quo plan, what actually is it? We get another hint as we move forward past the Sermon on the Mount into chapter 8. When Jesus comes off the mountain, that centurion, a Roman, a Gentile, an occupier, an enemy, comes up to Jesus and recognizing him. He's like, "Lord, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering." And Jesus' heart is soft toward him. He's like, "All right, I'll go." But then the centurion, surprisingly, is like, "Nah, you don't have to do that. I recognize authority when I see it. I've got authority. You've got authority. I tell people this needs to happen. It just happens. I know that you can do this by distance." And Jesus says, "I tell you the truth. I haven't found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven." So what he's doing is affirming again, that is what it looks like. It's not the full formula there in that exchange with the centurion, but that's what it looks like. Matthew 9, where Matthew gets signed up to follow Jesus, and he throws this party for all of his skeezy friends, and the religious leaders, they don't like it because that's not good. But Jesus likes it, and he's celebrating as well. And hearing about the religious leaders' complaint, Jesus says, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I haven't come to call the righteous, but sinners." There's another hint in this composite we're putting together of what kingdom readiness, being in the kingdom, looks like. These people are not impressive. These people are so unimpressive, in fact, that they wouldn't even get an Everyday Heroes segment on the local news. This is prostitutes and tax collectors and sellouts. Yet, Jesus is affirming that they are in the kingdom. You go to the end of chapter 12, and you have a whole original audience who's still thinking in terms of a physical family of faith, an ethnic family of faith born through Abraham, and part of that family comes to reclaim Jesus. Blood's thicker than water. And when Jesus' family comes to collect him because they think he's maybe kind of embarrassing himself, he replies to that request saying, "Who's my mother and who are my brothers?" Here, pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Aha! There's more indicator of what it looks like to be kingdom ready, to be a part of this new family of faith that is desiring to understand the will of the Father and then doing it. And you flip over to 13, you get two little micro parables about people who recognize the value of the kingdom and cash out everything to get it. One finds a pearl, one finds a treasure, but their response is the same. This is worth everything I own to lay hold of. And then in chapter 15, you got the Canaanite woman, another outsider, theoretically an enemy, who recognizes Jesus for who he is. And she comes up to him and she's like, "I need help." And after an exchange where she demonstrates her commitment and her faithfulness, Jesus answered, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." She's an outsider. She's lowly. She's insignificant. She's not a rock star. She's not a hero. And yet she looks like what a kingdom citizen looks like in that moment and is affirmed by the king himself. Then we get to the passage we looked at, whatever it was, a couple weeks ago, that is also about the little children. The disciples want to know who's the greatest in the kingdom. What's the currency here? What should we be into and investing in if we want to get ahead in this new kingdom values, kingdom currency thing? And Jesus calls over a little child and has him stand among them. And he says, "I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." Look, from time to time, it'll sound like a platitude where church people or religious people say, Jesus just loves all the lowly and the poor and the little children, and it just sounds like something you're supposed to say that is nice. But as we work through Matthew 19 together, we see this is actually what he's into. And all of the things that might cause us to think that we are awesome and somehow would bring some benefit to the kingdom, or might have some special qualifications that make us worth having on the team of the kingdom, that all gets shot down with how Jesus responds to the super impressive people, and even more so with how Jesus tenderly responds to the people who bring nothing, who come with a position of total humility and need and observe this posture of servitude and dependence on the King. Okay, that was a lot of Bible. I understand that we just booked through a ton, but from time to time we got to do this, right, my friends, to see the big patterns and to catch the stuff that might be more evident if we hustled right through the book of Matthew in a normal reading like normal people would do, but that we might miss when we go through it slowly the way we do. So thank you for some Bible adventures with me today and poking around at all of that stuff. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.